my extreme pleasure to welcome you in person to the 2022 State of the St. Louis Workforce event. This is our 14th year for putting this on, and I can't tell you how pleased we are to be able to do this in person. I think the last 2 years we had done this virtually, and my congrats to the team for pulling that off. It's hard to believe that just a little over a year ago that Proposition R was passed by the voters of St. Louis City and St. Louis County. Proposition R will allow the college to expand our workforce development programs extensively. We're working at this time for an expansion of about $500 million of projects across the district. Right here at the Flow Valley campus, you're going to see incredible change and expansion, beginning with a new health science building that will be to my left. It'll be out in a vacant parking lot right now that'll be adjacent to Pershal. We know the minute we open the keys or turn the keys and open that door, the building's going to be full of students. The same thing that happened at our Forest Park campus. And we're going to be expanding programming like that across the district. This campus is also getting a new advanced manufacturing center. And it's, of course, the data that we're seeing now about the needs for workers is troubling. It helps us as a college feel better, though, because we feel like we're expending our resources in the appropriate way. And I want to quickly introduce and acknowledge Dr. Craig Larson, who is the vice chair of our Board of Trustees this year, and all the hard work he did to make that happen. So thank you. I'd also like to do special thanks for our continued partnership with the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, and we're going to hear from William M. Rogers III in a moment. He is the inaugural director of the Fed's Institute for Economic Equity that opened in 2021. And he tells me this is his first in-person event, so we're glad that he's here, and he landed 20 minutes ago, so we're glad you're here in St. Louis safely. We also want to thank our workforce partners, including the Missouri Economic Research and Information Center, who produced the economic data in our report, the Missouri Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and the Regional Business Council. This year, we would also like to thank a new partner, MoSourceLink, who is providing a first look at the startup employment data at St. Louis, an incredibly important sector that's emerging at this time. And finally, I want to introduce one of our longest and closest partners in this effort, the St. Louis Business Journal, and one of my best friends who leads this. He's the market president of the St. Louis Business Journal, publisher Robert Bobrow. Bob, you come up.
Thank you for those kind words, Dr. Pittman. I'd also like to echo your sentiment. It is really nice after 2 years to be face-to-face with all of you all and see such a wonderfully energetic crowd. The St. Louis Business Journal is once again very proud to be partnering with the St. Louis Community College on this annual workforce event that is so important to our community. This is always one of my favorite events of the year. Workforce is the backbone of business, as we all know, and it's a topic that's always near and dear to us at the Business Journal. Earlier this year, April to be exact, St. Louis Business Journal actually launched its biggest project in its 42-year history, and we call it Advance STL. We actually surveyed our Business Journal audience, and we asked them, what are the 4 biggest issues holding us back from advancing as a region? And workforce was part of that list. And we tackled that workforce issue starting in April for the second quarter of this year. It's an important topic, obviously, for the St. Louis community, and the St. Louis Community College should be commended for their work in moving our region forward around this topic. However, workforce is not a challenge that's unique to St. Louis, and that's why it'll be nice to hear a little bit from a national perspective later today. But I also know we'll spend some time drilling down to a local level as well. Once again, the Business Journal is always proud to be a part of this program. And now, if you'll please join me in welcoming to the stage another longtime partner for this annual event, Angie Carr, Vice President and Chief Impact Officer of 9 PBS.
Hello, good morning. Oh, come on, we can do better than that. Good morning. Oh, there we go. The coffee's working. I am honored to be here today. PBS has been voted the most trusted brand for the last 19 years in the U.S. This marks the 5th year that we've done the State of the Workforce Report with our great colleagues, the St. Louis Community College. Most of our lives have been incredibly chaotic over the last few years. And that chaoticness is really testing our limits. And it's made clear the only way we can emerge from this is that we act and think collectively as one. Through these challenging times, we've continued to do this, think and act collectively, working to meet the needs of the community through relationships and trusted community organizations to understand the rapidly changing community that we live in. Highlights include hiring 4 incredibly talented engagement coordinators in our community, which are connecting with new organizations and meeting new families across our region. Drawn In has now launched. Many of you have heard about it. And that program is working for educational and entertaining initiative, as an educational and entertaining initiative to close the well-documented literacy gap, but also celebrate our Black and brown children in our region. Kids ages 6 through 8 now have the opportunity to engage with 4 comic book loving kids whose worlds collide and use literacy to turn them back right again. You'll see these stories shared through animated shorts, our website, as well as live learning events. Our team has also worked to create relevant and thought-provoking content that both showcases barriers, celebrated the experiences of the people of our region. And we, 9 PBS, your local PBS station, was ranked #1 in the country. Thank you. And now, the reason we're here today, 9 PBS works to engage trusted partners like the St. Louis Community College and the Business Journal to deepen our understanding and magnify learning to help our region flourish. Our community engagement model drives how we work with the community and illuminates solution-driven initiatives across our region. We look to understand community priorities and themes, create content that celebrates those themes, create content that drives impact, awareness, and understanding, and then we survey that. Then we lather, rinse, repeat. Over the last year, some of the themes that we've heard emerge are truck driver shortages, after-school opportunities, internships, apprenticeships, and soft skills. And now, I would like you to see some of the content that's recently been shown on 9 PBS. Let's take a look.
Is what makes our economy go round, bringing in nearly $800 billion to the U.S. economy in 2019.
Without truck drivers, our economy literally stops. I mean, everything you see around us, brought here by a truck.
A report released in October by the American Trucking Association estimated that the industry is short 80,000 drivers, an all-time high. But there are efforts to narrow the shortage.
Through St. Louis Community College, we offer several accelerated job training programs.
The college offers a commercial driver's license or CDL truck driver training program, where upon completion, students will have the skills and certification needed to become an entry-level, over-the-road or local truck driver.
The future is going to have to be equitable, and it's going to have to be inclusive, and it's going to have to be diverse. Val, how do we do that? what is that going to look like?
Equity is access for all to everything. So we can't just have one person getting one thing and the other person doesn't get it, or they get a piece of it or whatever. So the opportunities are going to have to be available to everyone. And that is going to have to go through information sharing. That's going to be having people at the table that you wouldn't have at the table before. You know, you've got to accept other thoughts and processes on how to get things done. You know, 6 + 3 = 9, 5 + 4 = 9, but we all get 9. So at the end of the day, we're going to have to be able to open ourselves up, like I said, that growth mindset, to say, hey, we're going to get there together. We just all may get there differently.
The 2021 State of the St. Louis Workforce Report shows the #1 shortcoming for job applicants are those qualities of good work ethic referred to as soft skills.
Soft skills that employers are really looking for is really self-management, being present, being on time, and staying on task. So work ethic is extremely important.
One organization working to improve this challenge is the St. Louis Internship Program. Coordinated through the Boys and Girls Club of Greater St. Louis, the program provides paid internship opportunities in addition to year-round career readiness training, which emphasizes the importance of developing those soft skills.
As you know, many employers say, we'll teach them the technical skills. We just need them to come prepared with the soft skills, and that's what they developed over those 60 hours of training and development.
For more information, visit 9pbs.org/pathways to work.
All right, and now I would like to introduce William Rogers III, Vice President and Director of the Institute for Economic Equity at the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis.
Good morning. Whoa, whoa, whoa. You had an opportunity to warm up with Angie. I'm only giving you one more try. Good morning. Good morning. And I'm only going to give you one more try because I've only slept for 3 hours. So if you, I know you all have slept way more than I have. Yes, and it's great to be here with you all. This is my first public engagement since the pandemic, so it feels wonderful to, and actually a little awkward, a little odd, but feeding off of your energy. But I would just want to say I'm so glad that I was recruited and asked to come join the bank. I've known Jim Bullard for probably a good 10, 15 years. He and I served on the United Way U.S. board together, and then I have a bunch of colleagues who also had worked in the system. What brings me here today is want to share with you about some work that we're doing at the Institute, and I believe I have a deck. Oh, it's right here, okay. But they didn't tell me about it. Okay, great. But before I launch into my remarks, I do want to share just some other items. One is that, yes, I'm coming to you and sharing some information, but for me, what I had hoped to do with the pandemic created some problems there, but was really to engage folks in the community and do a listening tour. So we're a little bit late, but I'm here, and I'm eager to get to know you all, know the challenges, know the successes, and just be a part of your community. As I shared, I had worked with Jim Bullard at United Way. Some of you may have heard of a concept called ALICE, where ALICE stands for Asset Limited Income Constrained and Employed. I'm Alice's brother. I had worked with the United Way of Northern New Jersey as a board member and helped to create ALICE. I have an academic background, and I spent the last 10, 15 years at a workforce development center. So and there we preach the notion that, right, workforce development is economic development, and that's so important, and we have to continue to remind people that. Next thing I just need to mention, too, is anything I share today are my own opinions and don't reflect the bank's opinions, Jim Bullard's opinions, or the system's opinions. And two fun things that we have coming up at the Institute that I hope you will be involved with. One is my colleagues and I, Nishesh Chalize, who is here. Where's Nishesh? Where's your hand? Right there, Nishesh. We are putting together our Labor Day message. We have a variety of blogs that will be supporting that, and you'll be getting a good dose of that Labor Day message today in my comments. And then the second activity that we have coming up is we host something called Conversations on Equity. And it's basically a 1-hour interview that I conduct with leaders from all across the United States, all across different backgrounds. And so my first was Liz Schuler, president of the AFL-CIO. Then the second was Cecilia Conrad, who's with the MacArthur Foundation. But on November 9th, I'm going to see you write this down or type it in your phone. But November 9th, we're having Ken Frazier. He's the former Merck CEO, but he's the founder of what's called 110. And it's an initiative that has been about trying to increase the number of blacks who are hired by Fortune 500 companies. Their goal is to do 1 million over 10 years. They're 2 years into their work, and they've done 25,000 their first year, and they've done 65,000 their second year. So I hope you can join us for that. All right. Well, let's just dive in. What I want to talk with you about today, and as I said, it connects to our Labor Day message that we've been putting together, are mostly what the economists or social scientists call vulnerable workers, and what's happened to them during the recovery, the expansion, and now this slowdown we're in. So first off, right, who are we talking about as being economically vulnerable? That's one question. Second, right, how have structural changes in the labor market impacted the job matching process for vulnerable workers? And are demographic differences in the unemployment of vulnerable workers more structural? And what do we mean by structural? So that's something that we're very focused on at the Institute, is that yes, we're concerned about oscillations and how opportunity changes with the business cycle, but our work is very focused on the scaffolding in a community, the structures in a community that can either help propel and provide opportunity, but also make it challenging for certain groups or individuals to move. And we'll get into more detail what we mean by that. And then from there, the other question we're focused on today is, what is the implication of these structural changes and hurdles for fighting inflation? Make no mistake, taming or curbing inflation, that is the Fed's number one target, number one goal. It may seem counterintuitive, but yes, increasing interest rates, and I at times have to wrap my head around it too, that increasing interest rates is an important tool for addressing equity. Right? That we've been hearing some of the various stories about how families in low to moderate income communities are having more difficulty meeting the higher cost of energy, higher cost of food, higher cost of childcare compared to higher income families. But that's only part of the equation for taming inflation and keeping the economy growing. That in order, we've been seeing job openings fall, but in order for unemployment to not rise, right? In order for unemployment to not rise, we have to make investments, right? We have to make investments in the job matching process. What do we mean by that? We need to remove or lessen barriers around access to childcare. We need to address challenges that individuals have been facing with mental illness or anxiety and depression, right? Transportation, right, is all of you in your work you found, right, as being a major challenge at times. And so by addressing those structural differences, structural challenges, makes the job matching process faster. Either it gets faster or it just provides and opens opportunities. And this is going to be important as the number of chairs, job openings, right, get smaller. So let's move on to beginning to answer some of those questions. Who are economically vulnerable groups? Well, we wrote in one of our first blogs to introduce the Institute and who we focus on. This is that list: teenagers, adults with no more than a high school degree, blacks, Latinos, women, especially in this past pandemic recession. Many people called it the mom's recession. One of my colleagues has done work on that. But people with disabilities, young non-enrolled folks with no more than a high school degree, Native Americans, and then within our district, we have residents of the Mississippi Delta. So when I talk about vulnerable, that's typically the group that we're talking about. And why are they vulnerable? Well, they're vulnerable for a variety of reasons. Again, from an economist's perspective, one, the share of their populations that are employed, it's below average. And it's even below, stays below average even in the best of times, these economies we've had prior to the pandemic and just recently. These are individuals who live in low to moderate income communities. And I made reference to ALICE, they're ALICE families. But most important, their unemployment rates or their opportunity to work is relative to other groups, they're the most sensitive to changes in job openings. Okay? That is, job openings go down, you see a disproportionate or a larger share of vulnerable groups losing their jobs. Or if the unemployment rate in your community worsens, you see a disproportionate or disparate effect. Okay? So this is just a picture to show you, illustrate that point. Made them large enough so you can see. But young adults, they're below that red bar, 51%. And this is basically the average employment share over the first 6-7 months of this year. Young black adults, 44%, right? And you can see, now hopefully we'll make this deck available to you all, so you'll have this. And this is just another relationship that I was talking about. This is just showing you the differential impacts that if the aggregate unemployment rate in the area were to go up, that you're going to see a bigger than average increase in the unemployment rate for young adults. That's the 1.6% there, that their unemployment rate will rise. And remember, it's already starting out at higher levels. Okay? Young black adults, young Latino adults. Then when you look at folks they live in the central city or core central city area versus a suburb versus a rural area, you'll see there's variation there. And then this is just another picture to show you that relationship I mentioned around job openings. Okay? That if job openings fall, you'll end up seeing the unemployment fall, the job openings go up here, then you'll see a bigger reduction in the unemployment rate for these vulnerable groups. Okay? Pretty standard. All right, let's talk about that question of how have structural changes in the labor market impacted the job matching process for vulnerable workers. Well, the obvious event that we all know about, right, and experienced is COVID-19 and the public health crisis that was created. Well, it challenged us in how do we maintain safe workplaces. It got us into this conversation of remote work. When I worked for the Labor Secretary, Alexis Herman, back in 2000, at that time it was telework, right? Telework, if you remember. But it feels like no one's made reference to that, or very few. Then we also had the two of the 3 R's. That there's the relief and recovery efforts, right? Unemployment insurance, the stimulus checks, the child tax credit, right? For many of us, and I have a number of friends who were part of the Great Resignation, right? That folks began to sort of reevaluate their careers or their time in the workplace, whether it be having an aha moment of I need to spend more time with my family, you know, or having that aha moment of I don't want to be there because I've got a chance of getting ill and passing it on. Right? The pandemic is our latest ushering in of a structural change that's impacting us. What are its impacts? Well, what do we mean here? What we're saying is for a given level of vacancies, when the economy shut down in that April 2020 and began to recover, you had higher levels of unemployment. Okay? You had higher levels of unemployment. So the vacancy rates were the same, but right after the pandemic, we began to open the economy up, unemployment rates were much higher. Why is that? Well, there was the big debate about, we're giving people too much unemployment insurance benefits, right? Because that's going to create a disincentive for them to work. right? Or you had folks concerned about, does my company have the necessary PPE, right, in the workplace? Okay? People had been isolated, and the thought of going back, so many people, yes, I want to be back with my colleagues, I want to be back in the workplace. But you also had many people who were contrary. Okay? And the economists use something called the beverage curve to help explain this relationship, this story. And this is just a picture, one of two pictures I'm going to show you. Okay, so if you're graphically challenged, right, you're gonna pay attention. not gonna walk on me. But this is what we're showing you here. Is just basically the unemployment rate is on the y-axis, and the x-axis, the horizontal, that's the vacancy rate. These four lines here, or four lines, are what do we call the beverage curve. It's the relationship between unemployment and the vacancy rate. So you can see they go downward as vacancies rise, meaning that as more vacancies occur, right, there's lots of opportunity, unemployment should fall. But what we're concerned about with what's happened here and nationally and locally is these different colored lines, these shifts, right? So that blue line where it says A, the blue line, that's where we were before the pandemic. Okay? We had very low unemployment rates, relatively high vacancies. Okay? Economy closes, begins to open. As I said, you have, right, at the same vacancy rate, you now have a higher unemployment rate. Right? Because you've provided a whole host of structural impediments or structural incentives or even the personal incentives that now lead people to say, I don't want to work, choosing not to work. And that's the red line. Okay? And as the economy's gotten hotter and hotter over time, as we've recovered, what's happened to that line? It's moved back in. Okay? One of the takeaway points here is what? That yellow line or the golden line, has it returned to the blue line? No. What does that mean? That means that we had structural features of the economy that created challenges for some people to work. We had new challenges created by the pandemic, but they haven't eroded, right? There's a stickiness. There's a residual amount of challenges that people are facing. Okay? And that's what this our blog that a colleague of mine just have written. It came out yesterday. Okay? That leads us to this question of, are the unemployment rates of vulnerable workers structurally different from the typical worker? Okay? And here's my point I made earlier, right? Even in the tightest labor market, barriers exist that make the job process or matching process inefficient. That's the economist's word. I had to put it in here at least once, okay? So, but it really, in English, longer time to find a job. Okay? As was shown in the video, right? Personal characteristics matter, right? Investing in those hard, but also the soft skills are so important, right? But my point I want to make out of right is, again, the strong role that structural features play in the labor market. And that's why I showed you that chart, that shifting out is structural, that shifting back in is improved structure, removing the very structural barriers or challenges people are facing. What are some of those? Access to childcare, transportation, right? Job information and networks, right? Very, very important for particularly young individuals. All right, this is just showing you at a point in time. Because some people say, well, you have a great economy, all these structural problems should go away, right? Right? He's shaking his head, no. Checks in the mail to you. But the challenge is that, unfortunately, these structural barriers, scaffolding barriers, don't go away. I mean, there is some erosion, but they stick with us. And this is just showing you that relationship for mothers, right? And that it starts out the blue line, pre-pandemic, okay? Low, just like the general economy. However, though, we see with single mothers, they actually have the highest curves, biggest shift upward, meaning for that same vacancy rate, their unemployment rate's higher. Okay? Their unemployment rate's higher. All right. Now, how does this fit into fighting inflation? How does this fit into fighting inflation? Well, simply it's that how it fits in is that one scenario that people are talking about is, or pathway, is that with job openings falling, okay, they're at such a high level that even if they fall a bit, unemployment won't rise. Okay? Even though if they fall a little bit, unemployment's not going to rise. Okay? A contrarian view on this is that when they look at past history, okay, unemployment always rises. Right? So there's this tension here. Here's where investing in childcare, investing in transportation, investing in mental health, right, is so important. Because the only way you can prevent unemployment from rising is investing in these types of structural challenges or barriers that people face. Okay. All right. How do we do this? It's investing in these areas that I just chatted about. So, for example, personal characteristics that impact the job matching process. We talked about various strengths, but then here are the weaknesses, right? Here's where we want to be putting our time in, right? Addressing these weaknesses that people have, and this is on the personal side. They're coming into the labor market. We're trying to stay in the labor market. Okay. But I want to come back to my big point about structural hurdles, right? The structural challenges that we have embedded in our communities, right? that we want to work on. Okay. So just to summarize and offer a conclusion, I'm going to tell you a little story, or a little story, and it'll come back to many of our childhood. Hopefully it'll be pleasant memories from your childhood. But as I said, number one, our job at the Fed right now is addressing inflation. Okay? Yes, counterintuitively, it may seem odd. Raising rates that has equity considerations in it, but it does. But as I said earlier, can't do it alone. Okay? A healthy economy is a shared responsibility, okay? And it depends on many players, many stakeholders. All of you know that. But here's the punchline, right? That to keep unemployment rates for vulnerable workers down or low or lower or from rising, we have to make those credible investments in those structural challenges that they may face, along with the personal, right, soft skills, hard skills investments. What does this really mean? This is a values conversation we're having early. Do we want to make investments, human investments in people today to where they're productive and they grow the economy? Or are we going to say, well, the invisible hand market forces, that's how things work, and settle on, once again, paying unemployment insurance, right, addressing hunger or food insecurity? And don't get me wrong, we need to do that. But what I'm trying to press upon you is we have a choice. We have a choice right now of what we can do, of where we can invest in people and invest in their communities, which makes them more competitive, more able to find jobs faster as the number gets smaller. Two stories to help you crystallize this point. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand, but my hand would be right there with you. How many of you remember the old Fram oil filter commercial? You can nod your head, or you can do the Carol Burnett thing. But what was that? The point out of that was, right, you can pay me now, or you can pay me later. And what it was that the McDonald Tech's client didn't want to pay whatever it was, like $10 for an air filter. Didn't want to pay $10 an air filter, and his mechanic or his tech said, you can pay me now or you can pay me later in the form of a larger bill. Another way to think about what I've been sharing with you, how many of you, now want to have you, how many played musical chairs when you were growing up? All right? Oh, yes. Good. All right. Remember the game, musical chairs. Music stops, you got to find a seat. Okay. Right now, we are in a world where there's plenty of seats. Right? Music stops, everybody gets a seat. But the challenge that we're going to be facing, potentially, is there are going to be fewer seats. Who gets those seats? Right? People who are able to maneuver faster, people who may be a little more physical, they're willing to box out, right? If you remember the games you used to play, right? Or teaming up, right? But folks who had more skills, more opportunity. Right? How does this connect to what I've been talking about for the last few minutes? It connects in the sense of, as those chairs go away, if we are able to provide investments, provide opportunities for those folks who are tagged as being vulnerable, where they're able to be competitive. And I'll just close on a comment or a phrase or a quote that my former boss, the Labor Secretary, Alexis Herman, used to say. This is about, as I said, it's about values, and it's about making the promise of America the practice of America. So thank you. Whew, made it. Now I can go sleep or take a nap. Next, I would like to introduce Phyllis Ellison. She's the Associate Vice Chancellor of the Workforce Solutions Group at St. Louis Community College. Thank you.
He really can nap now. We were not sure if he was going to be making it in from Denver, from New Jersey, so he's come a long way, and we're thrilled that he was able to make it with us today. Good morning, and you don't have to say it loud, it's okay. It's all right. I am thrilled to be here today to share with you the workforce report for 2022, State of St. Louis Workforce. Always a water bottle here. I'm thrilled to do this because I'm kind of a numbers geek myself. I love that we have the data, and I love that we are all together today coming out of COVID. So we will move ahead here and cover a range of things. I'm going to move pretty fast. There's a lot of data here, and you will actually have the chance when you get back to your office to have the full report. A few people have been able to take a glance at it. There's a lot of data there. But please take a look at it later. We're going to go through this pretty quickly, and we'll be covering 3 areas. The St. Louis economy, general numbers here on what pertains to us and our neighborhoods. Our employer survey that we do every year. This is the 14th year for that. And then we have some new data on startups. It's exciting here to be able to look at unemployment being back down to 3.5%. This is exactly what it was in February of 2020 pre-COVID. But when we look beyond that general statistic, there are some differences. For instance, when you look at the long-term unemployed, people that have been unemployed for more than 6 months, that's actually 15% higher today than it was pre-COVID. We also have another category that really isn't represented here called discouraged workers. These are workers that want to work, but they're no longer looking because they've been looking for so long that they've given up. That's another 3.5% of our workforce. I think for any of us that are out there trying to hire, we would love another 3.5% of the workforce to be out there responding to job opportunities. Next, we'll look at unemployment in terms of age and gender. When we look at employees over the age of 30, unemployment's low. We're looking at 3, 4, 5%. But when you look under the age of 30, especially for men under 30, we're experiencing much higher rates of unemployment. And much of this can be tied to a lack of education or training. And we'll see in a moment what the impact of that is on our region and in terms of the trajectory for our workers. Looking at our industry clusters in the region, St. Louis is fairly diversified. Our top 7 sectors employ about 75% of our workforce. These, you can see the numbers here comparing today versus 10 years ago. These sectors have been fairly stable over time, looking at maybe 5-10% shifts up or down. The one that stands out the most is our healthcare workers, which is healthcare is our top industry sector. It's our top employer as well, and that has seen a 16% growth rate since 2011. Next, we'll look at the age of our workforce. We follow the national trends here. Our workforce is aging. We have more people heading into retirement over the next 5 to 10 years than we do workers coming into the workforce. When we look at this for St. Louis specifically, 14% of our workers are under the age of 25, whereas 24% of our workers are age 55 and older. We've got a huge imbalance there. When we look at the decades in between 25 years old and 55, each decade includes about 20% of our workforce. This is one of my favorite slides, and it's becoming part of my soapbox. When we look at the education rates of our workers, we really can divide the St. Louis workforce into thirds. When we look at the left two boxes on your screen, which would be a high school diploma or less of education, that is 34% of our workforce. If you look at the right two boxes on your screen, which is a bachelor's degree or higher of education, that's 35% of our workforce. And in the middle, having some education, perhaps an associate's degree, but less than a bachelor's, that's 31% of our workforce. That means that a third of our workforce does not have any training or education beyond a high school diploma. In an area with 1.3 million workers, that is a huge number. Almost 2/3 of our workforce has less than a bachelor's degree. This is not unique to us. When you look at Missouri and the United States, we're very similar. But if we want to be a most competitive region for attracting employers and for staying competitive here, moving more of the workers from the left columns into the center and the right is going to be important for us. When we look at how those educational impacts start to affect our workers, it's huge. Education affects both unemployment and your earnings over a lifetime. Unemployment rates are 2.5 times higher for workers with only a high school diploma than they are for someone with a bachelor's degree. You can see the earnings rates here differ dramatically as well. Any training after high school serves to bridge that gap and to move a worker into a new career and a new trajectory for them and their families. Next, we're going to move into our second segment of the report, which is our employer survey. This is always interesting to see how our employers view what happened during the last year and what they are thinking about for their companies and their workforce over the next year. This is a really intensive survey. It's about 20 to 25 minutes per company. We had over 430 companies participate this year. We are also revisiting some of our favorite topics, but we introduced some new questions this year, and we'll touch on those as well. We touch on you don't have to read all the fine print, you can catch that in the report. We touch on a range of industries, we touch on a range of geographies, and we touch on a range of the size of companies. And we are trying to replicate what the typical employers are here in the region. In the employer survey, we look at what actually happened in their workforce over the last year, and then we also ask them to forecast what they plan to do over the next year. For instance, last year's survey indicated that 63% of employers planned on hiring during 2021. When they actually reported on 2021, 32% had added staff, about half. So that's a disappointing drop. Also, 19% of the workforce cut staff. And this is up significantly from the forecast last year, when the forecast was only 2%. As we look forward, employers are, again, having an optimistic view. 53% of employers are planning to hire in the next year, and only 4% anticipate decreasing their staffing. Hopefully, those are closer to the forecast next year than what we saw this last year. The low unemployment rates continue to plague all of us and companies that are hiring, and what we see is what we've all experienced, is that it's difficult to find candidates, with 62.9% of our employers reporting that they're experiencing a shortage of applicants. I won't even ask people to raise their hands if they've experienced that, because I think we all are. One of our base questions and favorite questions that we've asked each year has been, what are your barriers to growth? And there's a little bit of a mix this year in terms of their responses. The number one response is the same. A shortage of workers with the skills or knowledge that's needed is the number one barrier for companies to grow. We look at the economic conditions and government policy responses. Those categories dropped considerably from last year, though they're both still rated as high barriers to entry. When we look at two other areas, including childcare and transportation, these have returned to their normal levels of concern after being a bit higher during COVID. However, when you look at that over time, they were really not getting any better in either of those categories, and that goes over the last decade in the slide. So how are our employers adding workers? Most are hiring directly, rather than going down other paths. 71% added full-time staff, 53% added part-time staff. Other forms of employment, such as hiring temps or contractors, have dropped off again and are at all-time lows. And then when you look at areas as having employers return from furloughs or layoffs, I think we've really gone through most of those reserves over the last couple of years, and those paths towards finding workers are at an all-time low as well. So since employers are experiencing a shortage of candidates and a shortage of skilled candidates, most importantly, how are they filling the positions? 69% of our companies were forced to hire less experienced workers and to train them. 59% were offering higher wages. I think we're all seeing that. The option that I think is going to be interesting to watch over time that isn't quite caught in the survey is about employees that are working remotely for companies that are based somewhere else outside of St. Louis. It's another category we really haven't had to consider as much in the past, and it's going to be a drain on our workforce. One of our most popular and insightful questions has been about exactly which skills our employers are not seeing in their candidates. These are mainly, as have already been referenced, soft skills or the essential skills: work ethic, critical thinking, communications, people skills. When you start looking at the list here, the more specific skills, such as industry knowledge, comes in fourth, and technical skills comes in a distant seventh. So it's the soft skills that are really making the difference right now. We added a new question this year, focusing more on the positive side. These are skills that William referenced in his presentation as well, talking about top strengths that are seen in our job applicants. The good news is we have a really positive response to this. Honesty, respectfulness, positivity, verbal communication skills, dependability, all came in as top ranked. Now, we also asked the reverse of that question. We were asked which strengths were missing in applicants. And you could pretty much start at the far end and just work your way back. Taking initiative, creativity, discipline, responsibility, dependability, and writing skills were all lowest on the list. The interesting part is when we're looking at these strengths in terms of their importance to employers, they're all pretty tightly ranked. They're all important. Next, we'll talk about education levels, and we ask our employers about what type of skill level do you need for the employment that you're hiring. High school workers require a bachelor's degree or higher. Middle school workers require some training or education past a high school degree, but not a four-year degree. And low skill requires a high school diploma or less. And we'll start to look at what this means for our companies that are hiring. Most of the job needs that our employers have in the survey could be filled by low skills or middle skills. So less than a bachelor's degree of education. This year, interestingly though, we did see a jump in the high school area of 9% in the need for high skilled labor. When we look at middle skills, what are those? Examples include a registered nurse that had 21,000 online job ads this last year. Tractor trailer truck drivers, you saw in the PBS video, 10,000 plus job ads online. Manufacturer sales reps, 10,000. Retail sales supervisors, 8,000. Nursing assistants and health techs, 9,000. There are lots of jobs out there. These are very attainable skills that have a path directly to a job, and somehow we need to do a better job of matching our employees and our workers with the training and with the jobs. So if the employers are having a difficult time finding candidates, and when they hire them, the employees are not a great fit, and they have less experience than they'd like, then how are they providing the training and the development to get these employees ready for the jobs? On-the-job training remains the top choice by far. In-house classroom training is a distant second, and all the other categories you see up there are at their lowest level since the survey began 14 years ago. People want to get their employees working as quickly as possible. I think whether it's interesting or not a surprise, online learning remains at its lowest level ever, and I think Zoom has caught up to all of us. Firms are also reporting applicant shortages in the functional areas. Excuse me. These are prevalent across all sectors. These are at all-time highs in terms of those shortages in every category. Why is this? Some of them, like skilled trades and manufacturing, are probably impacted most by the aging workforce. We just have fewer people coming in than are leaving and aging out. Areas like patient care and probably all facets of healthcare and customer service are probably hitting pandemic levels of dissatisfaction and burnout. When we look across these functional areas, there are significant numbers of middle skill opportunities in each of these functional areas. Skilled trades, manufacturing, every single one of them is at least 33% of the job openings only need middle skills. It would be amazing if we took that third of our workforce with a high school diploma or less and trained them in opportunities that would take 6 to 24 months of training with skills that could move them into these jobs for our region. This is just another view of the level of experience that companies are looking for, and they're hiring across all of these, even with little to no experience needed. Also looking at candidates in terms of the level of education. Again, people are hiring across all of it. And for jobs that require the short-term training, only the short-term training to step into those positions, 71% of employers have roles open for that skill level. Another new question we added this year was around talent sourcing partnerships. We're seeing employers start to connect with educational and training institutions so that they can be closer to a source of employees. About 25% are partnering with 4-year and 2-year colleges. You can see the other range here. Identifying these workers earlier in their careers, it will be critical to introducing our next generation to the in-demand jobs. If students can't see and experience and hear about these positions, they're not going to pursue the training and education to move into them. Career shadowing and classroom presentations are huge for employers to come out and share with students. Paid internships, field trips, unpaid internships, we need to pay our interns. That's the only thing I'll say there. Oops, sorry, I bumped ahead here. Oh, I lost a slide. There we go, sorry. We'll also look at some of the employment barriers. We've been asking this question for the most part since the beginning. Again, criminal checks, drug screens, social media checks, not happening quite as much, financial checks. These screens remain fairly consistent for employers over time. They have not dropped dramatically. We do need to figure out a way to communicate with our workforce. That 45% of our employers that were surveyed are still doing drug screens. Legal does not mean safe when you come to work, and somehow we need to figure out how to communicate that, especially to our younger students. For justice-involved individuals, we've been tracking this rate since 2015. There's really been very little movement here as well, with company restrictions changing over the last 7 years. Remote work. Wow, people could either do thumbs up or thumbs down on this. People love it or hate it. There's not much in between, but it's something that's really key to a lot of hiring these days. As of all the changes, this is one of the most discussed and debated topics since the pandemic. 26% of our surveyed employers report that employees worked remotely. This is up slightly from 23% last year. And this is in line with a national survey that was done recently by Stanford and the University of Chicago that found that about 30% of paid workdays were being done remotely. And this is different than the pre-pandemic number of 5%. So it's still a dramatic shift. Looking forward, how do our employers think about remote work? About 60% are in the middle, and they're going to stay the same. 40% are still going to make changes. 22% are looking to add more remote work options, and 19% are looking to decrease. So I think this is a change we're going to still see many changes in as we move forward. We also added a question around what makes a good job. Please note, these are responses from employers, not employees. But it's interesting to see that the top 4 options that employers felt made a good job were pay rate, job satisfaction, job stability, and health insurance. Be interesting to see how this one changes over time as well. Next, we're going to move into an area that's been near and dear to my heart, which is startups. I'm super excited to share this data because it's the first time we've seen it in the region. We've partnered with MoSourceLink and are continuing partnerships with I-10 and TechSTL to bring this data to the region. We are looking at how many startup jobs are being created each year for our region. The St. Louis region in 2021 added 14,884 jobs, brand new jobs. I'll do a little bit of the definition behind this because it's important to understand. These are first-year startups hiring their first employees for companies under 20 employees total. This is not about companies moving a division into St. Louis or a new employer to the region. These are brand new jobs that didn't exist a year ago. These are, when you start looking at the numbers over the last 7 years, we have 7 years of data, which I'm excited about as well. We are seeing an average of 14,700 new jobs added every year. That's the equivalent of adding an SSM or a Boeing or a Mercy Health to our region every single year. This is not a one-time shot. These are also the newest companies. These are the babies, and they're hiring their first employees. These are also companies that are in every single county in the state of Missouri, and St. Louis County has the highest density of first-year startups of any county in the state. These, like I said, are the babies. They're high risk. 20% of first-year startups will fail in their first year, and even in Missouri, in Missouri, 55% of first-time businesses will no longer employ anyone after 4 years. Disappointing. However, the companies that survive continue to hire and continue to grow, and they actually counter all of those companies that close and continue to create more jobs than were created initially. We have to continue to place our bets on these companies to build and grow the biggest companies in our region. For the state of Missouri, since 2017, 187,000 first-time jobs were created by startups. 187,000 jobs. That's 80% of all new jobs that were added in the state. When we look at the St. Louis region, St. Louis added almost 72,000 jobs since 2017 by first-year startups. That's 31% of the jobs that were added in the state of Missouri. When we look at the industries that are involved, healthcare, already our biggest employer. It's no surprise they're also the biggest source of startups. What is a bit surprising is how heavy we are in terms of startups in the healthcare sector. Nearly 60% of the startups were in healthcare. Over the last 7 years, that's 28,000 startups in the healthcare sector. Coming in second are science and tech companies. We're a distant second. However, as we'll see in a moment, those companies tend to hire more employees and they also pay higher wages. As we look at the jobs created, you can see it's a more equal distribution. It's not quite so lopsided in terms of the industries that are impacted. We have to remember that for all of these jobs are created and filled by people in our community, for people in our community. This is so important that we continue to grow this. We were really fortunate this last year to have two companies go public, Benson Hill and Nerdy. That's huge. It's a big milestone for the startup community. Those of us that work with startups closely get excited when somebody hires 2 more employees. For 2 companies to be unicorns, reach the $1 billion mark was huge. We have to continue to grow more of these baby companies into the Benson Hills and the Nerdys, because a handful of these companies will end up being the next Enterprise Holdings, the next Worldwide Technologies, and the major employers in our region. From a training standpoint, it's just as important that all of us think about the skills that are needed across these industries to train the workers that are working for these startups, just as it is the larger companies in our region. Thank you for putting up with all of that. There's way more information in the report. You'll all receive a link to the full report that you can read over the holiday weekend. We'll switch to the next portion of our program, which is a panel discussion into 3 areas that are key to our region and that we'll continue to see as driving forces. That includes startups, the geospatial sector, and our immigrant workers. And I would like to welcome Dr. Pittman and our panelists to the stage.
We are back. Thanks, Phyllis, for a great report. And, I want to also thank Angie and William, listening to them of like, we sure have a lot of work to do in higher education in this community. And, at this point, it's my pleasure to introduce 3 leaders in our communities that are incredibly important to us. And the theme of this panel and the theme of the report is Pathway to Growth, as you've already heard, Pathway to Growth. So we're starting out this morning with some discussions, first with Dr. Danish Nagda. I want to welcome you. Let's give him a hand. He's the CEO and founder of Resilient Health. Betsy Cohen is the executive director of the St. Louis Mosaic Project. And then Andy Deering is the president of Spatial STL Advisors and lead for the GeoFutures Initiative. Welcome. So, we're all coming out of a pandemic, and this requires, I know, strategizing by businesses. You've seen some of the data up here. You've heard from the Fed about some of the challenges that we have going forward. So, in this period that we've all lived through, a very limiting environment, we had this thing called the Great Resignation. I don't know if you're feeling that in your companies. We certainly feel it in our college, where a lot of change and transition is going on. It's how do we address that? How do we continue to compete? In our case here, we're looking at a couple of individuals here that are well-versed in startup industries, as well being tied to long-standing structural sectors, and another leader who's thinking, how can we get more people into St. Louis County and St. Louis region to fill all the jobs needs that we have. So Danish, I want to start with you. So you are at an interesting intersection of 2 areas, healthcare and startups. And we saw the numbers up there, what that meant for healthcare. Your
There's a lot of
company,
us, yeah.
Resilient Health, has just opened its first cloud clinics. Cloud clinics. This is something I'm trying to get used to, all this new stuff. What do you see as the future of healthcare, one of our largest industries in our region?
I think for us to understand healthcare and where we are, I mean, everybody's thinking about health these days and for the past few years, but you know, there are some really big structural challenges that were mentioned earlier that I have to highlight because it gives you a sense of why that patient care number was so awful. And we should all talk about how challenging it is. I myself was burnt out as a doctor, so I can actually speak to it. But the three big things that are happening in healthcare right now are the demographic shifts. Every day, 10,000 people are turning 65. By 2030, that number is going to be 15,000 people a day. The second big demographic, the second big thing has been around COVID itself. So everybody thinks COVID is over. As a doctor, I have to tell you COVID is not over yet. But it's actually the impact that COVID had. There were three huge areas, and I'll be very quick with it. Number one was long COVID. It's something that no one's really talking about, but we all probably know somebody in our lives that is suffering from that. The data is very different, but you know, from 1 to 10 to 1 to 4 people that had COVID have long COVID. That is an entire generation of people that are going to struggle. That needs to be managed. The second big thing is mental health that was mentioned earlier. The mental health crisis is raging. We take care of, you know, a lot of workforce customers, and the number one thing that we've seen grow exponentially has been mental health issues. And, you know, overall, these two big aspects are leading to this third huge issue, which is, one, healthcare. It's nice to say healthcare heroes, but we're humans. We're healthcare humans. And so we are all burnt out. And what I mean by we, I'm speaking for doctors, nurse practitioners, PAs, nurses, MAs, paramedics. Everyone is tired. And we are being overrun, and a lot of times it feels like there's no end to this. And so when we're talking about the future of healthcare, the future of healthcare is a more equitable workforce that's actually solving these problems. And that's what's happening in this region right now. I think technology is coming. Many of you might have heard about all of Amazon's move in healthcare. The thing that they might change for healthcare is that they're treating workers differently. And they're training workers differently. And the workforce is changing. We just don't have enough people to take care of all these people. So we now have to have a conversation around workforce, which honestly healthcare has not done a good job of in a long time. And we have a bunch of clinicians that are quitting, you know, earlier than expected. Another thing that people aren't talking about, we're going to have a shortage of 140,000 doctors by 2030. Right? So we have this huge challenge ahead of us, but it's an incredible opportunity to redesign how we deliver care. Telehealth has been huge. What we're building, other hybrid models have been great, but there is this incredible opportunity for us to rethink healthcare from the ground up. Instead of thinking about the beautiful big buildings that are out there, we're going to start thinking about how can we bring it into the home, how can we bring it into the neighborhood, and I think that's what's going to happen in the next few months, years.
Right. Okay, thanks, Tyler. Well, that's important to me, even as an employer, and I think about how can we best serve our faculty and staff and our students and providing them those avenues for healthcare that's accessible. Because, you know, listening and seeing some of these statistics, it's going to be a challenge for all of us. While I didn't know there were that many people turning 55, I wish I was. No. I passed that up a while ago. Well, Betsy, let's go to you. Betsy, it is well known that the city of St. Louis is losing population, and the overall St. Louis region is forecast at stagnant population growth. That's a huge concern. I think everybody in this room is aware of that. We often hear that an influx of immigrants will help fill our gap in workers. Tell us about the impact that immigrants have on St. Louis.
Thank you. Imagine this. 2 days ago, I was at the International Institute with dozens of other community partners, and they were hosting a meeting with 3 federal representatives who decide and help allocate refugees from around the world, where they go, how many come to regions like St. Louis. So it was extremely interesting to share with them how proactive our region has been in welcoming, in this past year, close to 700 Afghan people, which means 184 families. There's work right now to get 381 Afghan people who are in Albania to get to St. Louis, and potentially hundreds of Afghans that are around the world here, as well as there's a plan in the region through the International Institute to try to attract secondary migrants, like what happened with the Bosnians in the 90s. And if we do a good job, and we have a newspaper and a community center and a chamber for the Afghan community, will we get other Afghan people who find it's too expensive in Texas and California and Virginia and decide to come to St. Louis? So there's a lot of activity going. We have almost 140,000 foreign-born people in the region. And what's important to understand is, what are our biggest foreign-born numbers? You might be surprised to know, number one foreign-born group in our region, Metro, is Indian. Second is Mexican. Third is Chinese. Fourth is Bosnian. And the Bosnians came, they're not the future, they're not what is growing. Certainly, we have many other areas of growth. The Mosaic Project, the St. Louis Mosaic Project, is part of the World Trade Center of the St. Louis Economic Development Partnership, and we have two major goals for the region with our community partners. One, to be the fastest growing major metropolitan area for foreign-born by the year 2025 on our small base of 5% foreign-born people, and secondly, to attract essentially 25,000 foreign-born people here between the years 2016 and 2025, which means about 3,000 a year. So if we could get 1,000 refugees, that's a third of the way. The other places where we are seeing growth now coming out of the pandemic, companies in Europe, the UK, Latin America, particularly in technology, agriculture, are again looking to bring employees to St. Louis. Foreign companies, some of our big international companies are now sending me a spreadsheet every week or every month to say, these are international people we're bringing, how can we help them connect and their spouses connect with resources for jobs, for social networks here as well. We have families here that are having other family members come from around the world and around the country. And then we have a very strong international student population, which you could see by the high education of St. Louis versus Missouri and the country. And we have now increasing numbers of international students coming back to the region.
Right, so it sounds like, you know, in listening to those numbers, this is a avenue or lane to help cure some of our population issues that we're facing right now.
First of all, 5% of our population is foreign-born. We first have to focus on the 95% of us that were born in this country and make sure that we're doing the right things for the 95% and that we grow our base, because that makes it easier to attract others. So we can't think that just being able to bring foreign-born is going to solve our region's problems. It's both. It's not one versus the other. But certainly, we have a very big opportunity, particularly with international students. It's extremely interesting to know that we have about 9,000 international students, and over half of them are in the STEM fields. And one of the things that our current president has done is he has broadened some of the visa characteristics of national interest waivers, certain outstanding O and E visas, so that if international students are hired by companies, there are some different avenues beside the lottery to get them to stay. The other thing that our employers do not know, do not understand, is that international students can work for 1 year after they graduate with their student F visa. You don't sponsor them. And if they're in a STEM field, which is over half of them, they can work for 3 years under their optional practical training view, which is longer. Data I saw yesterday, 75% of the employers say that those international students for 3 years is longer than their US-born students. And the government in the last year has added 22 new majors to that designation, including climate change, artificial intelligence, economics, social sciences, data metrics, all these areas that you can go to our universities and their career services and say, I'd like to talk to some of those international STEM students about keeping them on their visa, but having them work for me. So please do that. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Betsy. That's encouraging news, given some of the numbers we've been seeing up here. Okay, Andy, you represent the geospatial industry. which is viewed as one of St. Louis's current strengths and one that has a huge potential for continued growth. We typically think of geospatial as meaning the NGA and its new campus in North St. Louis. And at least I think some of us, we often think of geospatial jobs. Those are really, high educational jobs. You have to have a PhD or advanced education to be that. I mean, is that accurate, or could you, if not, could you talk a little bit about all the jobs that are available and what kind of educational level they would need?
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Pittman. So first, geospatial. It's kind of a tough term. Sometimes it seems very scientific. At the end of the day, I think many of you probably use Google Maps to try to navigate into the campus, and a lot of that is geospatial. The opportunity that we have, and I'll start the $1.7 billion investment that the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency is making in St. Louis is going to have a reverberation on what we're doing here. And it's not just the PhD. If you look at our industry segment, very different. The playbook that Greater St. Louis Inc., this initiative, GeoFutures, that is out of Greater St. Louis Inc., took is a playbook that we've done here before. It's the playbook that we had around plant and life sciences about building an industry cluster. Except for when you look at what the employers are looking for, it is not PhDs that they're needing. It is almost that middle tier workers that Phyllis was talking about earlier. And so let's explain that. We will need to have PhD scientists in this area. We recently launched the Taylor Geospatial Institute, which brings 8 institutions together, and they're going to do high-end research around what the future or what some of these complex challenges of what geospatial will solve. But we have many employers here, 27,000 jobs directly related to the geospatial industry that are really data analytics, data science, computer programming from all stages. They don't have to be that experienced to maybe some master's level experience there. So it's a spectrum of that. But as Phyllis outlined in this report, and we see it directly with that, our employers are saying, can you just give me this skill level? We'll train them up. And the great part about it is you look at where we are with our universities, and there's more degree programs than there were 5 years ago that are available today. But let's start working our way back down. There's now certificate programs that are available. There's now our universities partnering with upskilling or reskilling partnerships that are there to now start looking at how do we create equity, how do we create opportunity for all? And we have many partners that are available to say, hey, we can set up a workforce development center in your neighborhoods that you can take advantage of, that maybe you're a full-time mom and part-time worker, but you want to have a career in this field. Guess what? There's a program for you that will help give you the skills and get you right into the workforce to have good paying jobs. And you didn't need to have a 4-year degree to do that. So those opportunities are there. The great part about it is what the GeoFutures roadmap did was saying, hey, this is where we need to go. This is what we need to do. All of the organizations around St. Louis have started just figuring out where they can plug in, where they can align. And you start seeing some of these now success stories where there's a publicly traded company that's located downtown that is in this space, and they said, St. Louis is a model for creating diverse workforce, the workforce of the future that we need, that we cannot get from the coasts and we cannot get from Washington, D.C. You guys are growing that here. Keep doing that. And so the headlines that we've seen, we launched the GeoFutures roadmap in 2020 amidst the pandemic, all of the uncertainty, and we see the opportunity greater than it was before. And I will say, it's not just national security. We see the opportunity for, and we're seeing a lot of demand for agriculture, for health, for transportation logistics. And the interesting part about it is the recruitment of these businesses, and I'll bring my friends from the Danforth Center into this, we have so much interest from South America on what we're building and growing here. Talent is a big piece of that. And if they can set up and bring talent here, if they can grow talent that here and connect it in, but maybe they're learning and taking the same skills that maybe the NGA workforce is taking, we have all those avenues and those pathways. They can have good and paying jobs here in St. Louis that's not supporting maybe the national security sector, but it's that emerging ag tech market that we have. So lots of opportunities, lots of pathways that have created that are available, and we're just the beginning of what we're doing here in geospatial.
All right, thanks, Andy. So, you think of NGA in the defense sector, and, as you mentioned, for those of you that Googled Map to get in here this morning, first of all, congratulations for getting into the event. Sorry about all the construction going on. It'll be a lot better when it's all done that we know. But you mentioned a few, are there other industries outside the defense sector that you see growing as a result of what's happening? Maybe starting with NGA and what folks like you are doing, but what other sectors might you see?
Yeah, so it's actually interesting, you know, for NGA, and when we talked about some of those, maybe those things that they need to have before that, if you're going to work at NGA or in the defense sector, you're going to have a background check. You might have to have a security clearance that requires those sorts of things. And so we're trying to teach those types of soft skills earlier for the high school, middle school, and high school students to say, this, if you're wanting a job in this career field, just be aware of what that workforce is looking for. However, in these other industry segments that we're seeing, you might not need to be a U.S. citizen to be able to do that, but you can take advantage of the certificate and degree programs. And so really what we've seen a lot lately around is this emergence of national security is not just defense. It is food security, it's climate security. And those same skills, you know, for example, NGA is monitoring the Arctic. Why are they monitoring the Arctic? It's not because there's, you know, conflict going on in the Arctic. There's not anybody there. But they're monitoring that because that's the very first part of what political or social instability can be in a country that may have something going on that they will monitor. Those skills and those partnerships that they want to have are not with the traditional defense industry segments. They're looking for partnerships with ag tech professionals, with climate professionals that are not coming from that national security space. And so just that workforce and that partnership, we have a unique opportunity at that intersection of ag tech, food tech, geospatial, national security, that we can be the leader of what the future national security challenges are, and one that we're also addressing this national security challenge of not having enough STEM graduates. If we can do that here and we can provide that here, then more opportunities will be created to be that global center of excellence around geospatial, but how we're actually addressing national security challenges.
Thanks, Andy. That's really exciting and encouraging news. And I had mentioned earlier that this was our 14th event. This is actually my 8th that I've had the opportunity to participate in. And I just can't help but continue to be excited about how can we improve St. Louis, improve the place that we live, work, and play. I mean, we're fortunate to have these three leaders and experts up here and some of the exciting things that are going on with them right now. So this is questions for all three of you, so feel free to jump in or get a conversation going around these. So all of your sectors are growing and simultaneously changing. As we're all adapting to the world, so there's a lot of variables coming in on everything that we do right now. And it makes it challenging, certainly, for people to understand your sectors because this is so new to a lot of people that are here. But first of all, the first question is, what are the hottest opportunities? What do you see as the hottest opportunities in your area, your sector, or your organization?
Well, I'll take a stab at that. In terms of talent and hiring, I think what's really important is to understand how to access our foreign-born and our different ethnic groups. And I do encourage people to consider, we have an Asian American Chamber of Commerce, we have a Hispanic Chamber, we have an African Chamber, we will have an Afghan Chamber. There's a group for the St. Louis Bosnians, the St. Louis Mosaic Project posts jobs, the International Institute has a workforce team. There are many avenues, and I think what's hot is to understand that instead of sitting back and saying we don't find the right people, is to build relationships, show up, and figure out where good people are going to be for the less skilled, the middle skilled, the high skilled jobs, and go and make those relationships or get advice and warm introductions from me and others so that you can find the talent that you need.
I think healthcare, most people here have seen healthcare change quite a lot in the last few years. I think what we're going to see and the opportunities in healthcare are how technology now takes a big part of your healthcare experience. I don't think any of the people in this room are new to things like Zoom or FaceTime. Now it's entered healthcare. You can actually FaceTime your doctor or Zoom your doctor or do telehealth, as it's called. But I think what is exciting is how do we now bring it all together? The doors are open again. You can see your doctor in person again. So how do we actually combine all of that into what's called omni-channel care? And there's a bunch of people coming into this space. Walmart's gonna build hundreds of new health centers. Amazon just bought One Medical. Companies like mine are building cloud clinics, you know, and where you can go in and see your own ear exam, hear your own heartbeat. This is becoming table stakes. Like, this is the expectation that healthcare is gonna be better for the consumer. So, you know, when we think about the opportunity is, how do we actually make healthcare engaging? How do employers reduce total cost of care by increasing their utilization of high quality primary care? Which means, by the way, health systems are gonna be held to this belief that they have to provide high quality care. You just don't go there to get care, you have to get high quality care. Are they gonna be able to adapt? And so the big opportunity is, how do we bring technology to improve quality and experience for patients? And I think after the pandemic, it's now an expectation. And I think that's the big opportunity now.
I would second. I'm excited about that. But from the geospatial side of things, it's been hard for us to say in St. Louis, hey, we're the tech hub of the Midwest. We're the Silicon Prairie, right? It's pretty competitive. The great part is we're tricking them all right now in this. And that geospatial is an exquisite technology or capability, but it's so pervasive, and the skills needed and the talent that's needed to do that. If you just saw the announcement maybe a couple of weeks ago, there was a major company that came downtown, Scale AI. They are an artificial intelligence company. They're a high-tech Silicon Valley-based company, and they are growing 200 up to 500 jobs here in St. Louis. And those are data analyst jobs where they're training and retraining or providing veteran resources or others to get those skills. The great part about that is we've brought somebody from the Valley here. They've seen what we can do. We're the engine to provide these cool AI and autonomy and all these cool systems that you think that we're going to be that. We're the opportunities with tech jobs. And the great part about it is, maybe if you're like, hey, I want to try that out, but are my skills transferable? Absolutely, they're transferable to other major companies that are looking for those types of tech skills. Centene's looking for those types of people. Just go out and look at that. So we're not just creating a workforce that just supports geospatial. We're creating a tech workforce that's going to help be sustaining, that's going to bring more companies here to be able to set up shop to where we have the talent and the resources necessary to do that.
All right, I'll kind of ask the opposite question then. What would you see as the biggest shortfall or risk area or threat, perhaps, to what you're doing in your sector?
I'll start in this. I'll use an economic term, our inefficiencies. So we do have a lot of employers that are looking for people, and we do have a lot of employees that are looking for jobs. We've got to make that process more efficient. We can go out there and try to count and find those jobs, but just providing an easy way for people to discover what jobs are available, for employers to tap into those resources to where it's not just a one-on-one with individual schools or workforce groups. We've got to make that easier and more efficient to get those employers the folks that they need, and likewise for employees to find those jobs quickly and be put into that workforce, because we need them now. And we have a lot of organizations that are growing that talent, but we just need to connect the two together to make sure that they see that advantage here.
Yeah, I would build on that, and just like our speaker from the Federal Reserve talked about the matching. What's really important is, and particularly for our foreign-born, is as employers to understand that your systems have biases in the way you do applications, the way you ask for data, some of the unconscious bias against accents and things that really are not going to be part of the workforce. And then also the guides for our foreign-born community about how to apply, how to make it through your systems. That's why I wrote a book last year, Welcome to the USA, You're Hired, a guide for foreign-born people seeking jobs. And I'm finding that it's being used by both the applicants and by the employers so that they see the barriers that they didn't know were there as they're trying to hire talented people. But that matching is so important for all of our jobs.
I think it's also a mindset challenge that we have right now. So one of the things that we've done is we started talking about ecosystems, right? And I'm actually really excited about Scale AI coming here. I'm a big fan of their leadership and what they've done. But, part of the mindset is let's get people to come here, right? And again, I'm a startup guy. We have a bunch of startups here locally. I would love to see the ecosystem reinvest more. And really, when I talk about ecosystem, I'm not actually talking about dollars investment in cash. That's actually not the hard part, because with the pandemic, the one good thing that happened is people like my company and many others have been able to raise a lot of money from outside of St. Louis, as well as here. But what I'm talking about is the corporate customers, the people that you can go and sell to, the local businesses. Will they trust a local startup or a local St. Louis company to solve their challenges? And that mindset, sometimes, and a lot of people here are from St. Louis, sometimes we trust others more than ourselves, right? We've got to change that mindset. That is our greatest challenge moving forward, is how do we say, you know what, I'm going to hire someone who's building a company here because they actually share my values. And so these are the questions that we have to kind of answer. I would say it's one of the biggest challenges for growth for all companies, not just the startups.
Well, thank you. Well, looking at the clock, we want to be true to our word when this event began and ends. So first of all, can we give our panelists a hand? You did a terrific job. Thank you. You know, I wouldn't mind staying here another hour asking them a few questions, but I know I can't get away with that. But I want to thank you all for being here today. You know, I feel like I know the doctor over here is telling us the pandemic's still on, so I know we still have to be cautious with our everyday lives, but it's just so good to see you all in person here today, and I really appreciate you taking the time to come out and spend a few minutes with us today. We hope you enjoyed seeing the Flow Valley campus. A lot of great changes are on the way here to help address some of the challenges that we heard today. Everyone, thanks so much again for coming. Have a safe trip back to your work or home. Thank you.